Hello, everyone. Great. We've got a number of people coming in. Thank you for joining us. We'll give it one more minute before we get going. But it looks like things are good. Cool. Um, Rob, you can see the Q&A element. Is that right?
I can, yeah.
Okay, cool.
If
Awesome.
anyone's got any questions already, I'll be very surprised.
Yeah, I would too. Um, but cool. Looks like we've got a nice little number of people joining us. So let's get into it. Hi everyone, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about automating your shipping as well as your order management processes in the new year. So if maybe you're in a bit of a tricky time with the holiday season, or you want to make some improvements and optimizations in 2025, you're in the right spot, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, Today's agenda, we're going to talk about sort of some of the shipping problems that you might be having, how to fix those things. We're going to look at order management and then how to fix purchase and sales orders, sort of like as a whole, and some best tips and best practices. And then we're also going to talk a bit about the Katana and ship theory integration, because we can solve a lot of those problems together. But we'll try and make it a little bit more balanced, so it's not just on the integration. We're going to talk about some general things that you can do for your business. And then if you have questions, please just put them into the Q&A box. Rob is going to be keeping his eyes open for those, and we'll answer them towards the end of the webinar.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see lots of people here. I'm Rob. I'm the partnerships manager for Ship Theory. So it's basically my job to tell you how fun and exciting the world of shipping is. I'm sure everybody feels that way. But I'm lucky because I get to work closely with our ecosystem, which is marketplaces, e-com sites, ERPs, warehouse management systems, accounting tools, CRMs, and Katana are a key part of that. For those of you guys who maybe some of you already work with us, for those of you who don't know who Ship Theory are, who on earth I am, to give you a quick insight, Ship Theory is a piece of software that sits between a merchant's marketplaces like Magento, Shopify, eBay, Amazon, and so on, and with their carriers. So Royal Mail, FedEx, DHL, GLS, etc., etc. Ship Theory's job is to provide a shipping rule set so that a merchant can create their own rules. It might be based on the carrier and the weight and the end destination, lowest carrier rate, SKUs, product values, whatever other reasons they might want to create rules based on, so that as soon as an order hits Ship Theory, the relevant carrier is selected for each and every order that comes through. From there, the order automatically will send the right label assigned to the right carrier to the merchant's warehouse, print label, and the merchant can then pick, pack, and ship their item, send that off, and Ship Theory will then send through the track information back to original order.
Cool. Thank you, Rob. Hello, I'm Richard. I'm from Katana. I also work with our technology partners like Ship Theory. So I help our customers find like integrated solutions so they can stack them on top of Katana, to get the platform that they're looking for to run their business in terms of inventory and manufacturing. If you don't know what Katana does, we are an inventory management software for growing businesses. We cover inventory, production, accounting data, and reporting so you can understand what's happening with your business and how to make decisions and delegate.
Perfect. So typically, when merchants come to Ship Theory, they've got a headache or a pain point that we're trying to help solve. Usually, there are two types of merchant that we work with. Often, the first will be when a merchant's using a similar software as Ship Theory, but it doesn't connect to the right platforms or couriers, and therefore they're using two side-by-side systems, which means that they've got a lot of manual processes going on, takes up a lot of time. And the second type of merchant that works with Ship Theory or comes to us is actually manually generating their own labels, which is incredibly time exhaustive. They're logging into multiple carrier portals, uploading all of their orders, and then individually assigning the right carrier to each and every service, which is very long-winded. That leads into a lot of difficulties managing the couriers, because it's hard to keep track of which courier service you want for every single order. And often a lot of businesses have to create quite long-winded processes and that are rigid to cope with that. That means that it can be very difficult to change courier provider, because you might have a very set, rigid format for ensuring that the right carrier takes your products, and therefore you can't easily switch between carriers. Say one lets you down, they don't deliver on time, or they break a parcel, or they deliver to the wrong location. It's hard to then change your whole process when you've got this rigid process that you train your staff on, to quickly change to a new carrier. Thanks, Rich. So yeah, how do we improve that shipping experience? I think the key thing is, shipping might not come across as fun and exciting and very sexy, but it is really important. You can have the best product in the world, but if it doesn't arrive on time, or arrives damaged, or arrives in the wrong location, that impacts the customer's perception of the product that they've received. So in order to keep customer satisfaction as high as possible, we need a really smooth, streamlined shipping experience. Now that we're coming to the end of 2024, I would definitely advise that you look at running an audit of all of your current processes, find out where the bottlenecks are, what inefficiencies are you experiencing, where could you potentially save time in your shipping journey. Look at maybe getting a report from your carriers, look at the loss rates, how many were late, how many were damaged, understand an overview of your whole process, so that you can start to get feedback and look at the results, so you can then start to create implementations for 2025 ahead of time. Certainly, wherever you can possibly, automate the process of shipping, because that's going to save you a lot of time and have knock-on effects elsewhere. It might be that you can automatically connect your ERP or WMS or your marketplaces to your carriers. If you can do that, then great. If you require a tool like Shiptheory, no problem. We've got a team of people here who are experienced and can certainly help to advise whether or not Shiptheory is the right fit for your business. What that means is that once you've got that automation in place, it's much easier to work in a multi-carrier setup. And that can be incredibly beneficial, because not only are you able to be more flexible and unloop when you're stuck in a process, you can start to look at ways of quickly switching between carriers. If one lets you down, you can easily move that volume over to another carrier. That equally means that you can then start to negotiate better rates with carriers when you've got multiple options available to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. So sort of in tandem with that, before you can ship things out, you either have to buy things or make things so customers can buy them and you can ship them. These are a lot of the headaches that people sort of have when they come to Katana, or they're looking at a new platform, or they decide they need to go from paper and pen or having it just all in their head to a bit more of a programmatic system. So you might be managing your business on pen and paper right now. It's great, totally fine. But once you start scaling and you've got multiple team members, it's really hard, because those spreadsheet inefficiencies or just using an analog system might break down. Pretty typical complaints that people have is they're not quite sure about the delivery and the wait times on their stock. This means that they're overstocked on the wrong things, or they're understocked on the things that their customers want and they really need to sell. So you're basically paying too much for the things you don't really need. You're losing out on potential revenue. Another one is allocating your inventory to complete a finished good. So if you're not quite sure, if you use this part for this order, does it mean that you can are you gonna be able to fill the order behind it, or do you need to reallocate and reorder? And then also a lot of people are spending just way too much time on the administration that goes into purchase orders, especially. And you're sort of crossing between digital forms, physical paperwork, and this can is eat up a lot of time. And then the more systems you have between, is a greater opportunity for errors and mistakes to happen. But we're going to talk about how to fix those things. So just as Rob mentioned, a really good way to go about this process is with a bit of an audit. So it really helps if you and your team come together and you sort of make a map or a visual exercise on what is the full step-by-step process that's currently in place to make a purchase order for your business. So you can sort of see like, what does this entire process look like? Maybe you can identify where things are breaking or you're missing information, or what are you spending too much time on, or just what is like not a pleasant experience for you and your team. Make sure that everyone who is part of the sort of purchase order process is part of this. So you're not missing out on things that you might not know, that we've got like now a baseline for performance. Next thing you want to do is start to standardize where you can. So develop some processes and templates. This can be pretty simple of just like a standardized PO template, making sure that all the details are included, like the vendor info, SKUs, pricing, those terms, and delivery instructions. Something that will really help your business, and you probably knew this was coming, is look at either getting an ERP system, or maybe if you have one that's not working for you, consider what else is out there. Because a lot of the things to solve will be fixed by a ERP system like Katana, because we can automate the purchase order and sales order creation, and connect to tools like Shiptheory, which can then take care of the shipping. Then the data will go back and forth, and you can understand what's happening. But most importantly, whenever you're picking an ERP system, make sure it's going to integrate with the other platforms that you're using to run your business. So this can be most often is CRM, bookkeeping, e-commerce, and shipping. That way you're creating just a singular set of data for both your accounting and like business management processes. And you've got the same numbers in one place that everyone has access to. So you're not having like multiple versions of data floating around. Next thing is look at a forecasting and demand planning system. This is something that's part of Katana, but there's definitely other standalone options out there. But what this will do is it will look at your historical sales data, and then sort of like give you an understanding of these are the peaks in your seasonal business. These are the particular items that sell really well. These are the things that don't sell as well. You might be surprised about what the results actually are. A lot of these forecasting planners will also tell you like where your highest margins are. So it can help you run a more efficient and profitable business. Something else that these systems really have is, or that they're really good at, is integrating the safety stock and lead times from your business, or sorry, from your suppliers. That way you can understand the optimal reorder point and lead times for your supplies. That way you don't run into being out of stock on something you really need. Because you'll understand, I need to order this thing with this much time from this specific supplier. That way you don't have to have tons and tons of, money tied up in stock and space in your warehouse dedicated to things. But you're sort of purchasing at an efficient level. Final thing to think about with purchase orders is setting up some data validation controls. This can be rules that flag discrepancies between POs, invoices, and receipts. So if your quantities or your prices don't match to the agreed terms, you'll get a notification so you can correct this with your supplier before things continue. Another thing that can be really helpful is if you want to delegate more sort of autonomy to your team members, you can set up like pre-approved products and budgets for your employees so they can purchase only verified items at the negotiated rates. So you're not purchasing things that your business doesn't really need or too much of the wrong things. But you can also start to delegate and give your team a bit more control, which is helpful. I see someone has a raised hand. I'm going to try and answer this one. Miriam, go ahead. Mahim? Sorry.
Yeah, hi, Richard.
Hi.
Hi. So, I just want to understand how we connect in e-commerce. As you mentioned, the third point, connect your e-commerce and booking
Yeah.
and bookkeeping software.
Yeah. So with Katana, we have a number of e-commerce platforms that we have a native integration set up for. So this is Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce. We integrate with things like QuickBooks and Xero. And most systems out there will have connections to bigger platforms like that. If there isn't a pre-existing integration for what you're looking for, you can look at setting up an API or a custom integration to connect your data. You can also look at some automation platforms, things
Okay,
that we work with. One is called Make, M-A-K-E. The other one is Extensive, E-X-T. Oh my God, why am I spelling this? Extensive, like the word extensive with no E at the end. So
okay,
Make and Extensive both allow you to set up automations and data passes. Depends on what the platform is, but I would look into those two if what you want to use doesn't have an existing integration.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Anything else?
No.
Okay,
Please
cool.
continue.
Cool. Next slide. All right, sales orders. So some of this will be a bit similar to what we just talked about with purchase orders, but I've tried to make it as different as I could. Another good thing to start with is once again, do an audit so you have a baseline understanding of what's working for your business, what's not working, what do you want to keep the same, what do you want to change. But once again, starting with an order processing system. So it's going to be an OMS or an ERP, like Katana is Enterprise Resource Planning Platform. So you can centralize all the data, your confirmation emails, and get updates on your inventory and accounting records. Once again, it's really important to connect your CRM, your ecom platforms. So we're connecting with your not your partners, your customers, and actually like taking in sales. So you can direct those purchases right into a fulfillment queue without having to re-enter the data or upload it manually. Another thing you can look at is setting up an EDI. So this is for B2B transactions. Once again, this can like speed up the data process, and because you're only doing one input, you're not looking at duplicating and you're lowering the risk of error. I'm also going to recommend that you reevaluate your internal collaboration tools. You might be doing, everything over email or on the phone. But what you really want to have is some sort of like system where everyone is able to access the data that they need. So this can be your sales team, finance people, customer service, your warehouse team. So they're all looking at the same information, and that way you don't have multiple versions of like, say, an Excel sheet floating around, which can change, and then people have got a different understanding of, what's in stock or how much something costs. And a lot of these platforms with an OMS come with shared dashboards, so you can look at like a quicker resolution plan and you're all on the same page. Another way to fix some of the common promotion and sales headaches, which I know we all just went through with Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is look at pricing rules within your order management system so you can have discounts, promotions, and tiered pricing set pretty consistently. Another thing is setting pre-approved discount limits for your team. That way your sales reps can apply discounts up to a certain limit that you're comfortable with without having to get managerial approval, which can sort of speed up the process. And another thing to think about with this process is once you've done your audit and you've got an understanding of, okay, where are things going right? Where are things going wrong? What is the sort of average time it gets to go or takes us to fulfill an order and ship it? As Rob mentioned, you can also look at, what are the like loss rates or shipping times with your couriers. So start to like aggregate that data and, maybe once a quarter reevaluate. And this is like a continuous improvement sort of project. So you'll get like incremental benefits every single quarter. And Rob is going to talk to you about our integration.
So I think the beauty of the Katana Shiptheory relationship is that we work really closely together and we've got a seamless integration. The purpose of that integration is to connect Katana directly to Shiptheory so that you get the benefits of inventory production management and automated shipping. The way that it works is that you would set up your shipping rules. So that might be based on the weight of a product being sent or the end destination, as I mentioned earlier, or different types of SKU that you're sending out. You set those up in Shiptheory, and then when the order's ready for dispatch in Katana, that information is transferred seamlessly over to Shiptheory. So you've got key data like the SKUs and the addresses that are passing between the two systems automatically. It just means that there's no human interaction, so no opportunity for any human error. So at that point, happy days, you've got automated label generation without any manual input and real-time updates between the two systems. So you've got inventory sync and updated order status. And the result is that we've streamlined our operations there. Great stuff. So all of our data integrates seamlessly without any manual input at all.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Okay, so let's start with a bit of Q&A. I feel like there's a Rob.
Yeah, so Greg's
Yeah.
asked, is forecasting using AI technology?
Yes, it is a thing that we have in Katana. We have a forecasting planner so you can understand what you should order based on your historical sales data. As we also pull in data points like what your lead times are and sort of what those things cost. So yes, that is something that Katana does with our demand planning module.
Perfect. Has anybody got some questions you want to pop in the Q&A? We've got another one from Greg. Is it native AI or another separate app?
It is native AI, and it's fully embedded into the Katana platform. We have another question from Mahim.
Yeah, hi Richard.
Hello.
Yeah. So, Richard, actually, I'm handling the global logistic from India. I'm working in biotech healthcare group company,
Mhm.
and we are and we have offices across the globe, right?
Yeah.
We have manufacturing plant in India as well as in Europe, and we have 7 to 8 JV joint venture company across the world. And presently, we are working with a different shipping company, courier company. Now we are planning to establish the e-commerce business
Mhm.
yeah, we want to hire the e-commerce platform so that
Yep.
we will integrate all over the world dispatches in the one platform, and we
Mhm.
get the shipment visibility, and the price should be freeze because we are sending the goods to our doctors, hospitals, so we
Yep.
have to arrange dispatches very fast.
Mhm.
So we have offices in Brazil, Latin, in
Yep.
Europe, and Oceanic region also. We
Okay.
have
So fully
offices in MENA
global. Nice.
region. So how can we develop this e-commerce? How can we enter in the international e-commerce so that we will smooth our shipping across the globe?
Yeah, so I think you should definitely go with one of the like e-com players. You might need something like Shopify Plus, which will enable you to have like a B2B portal. And it's like a really robust like e-com site where you can have like localized languages. And I think on your not a Shopify expert, but I think you have like a portal where you can see like because it sounds like you need to have multiple stores or multiple like versions maybe of your website. So I go with something like Shopify or BigCommerce, and then you would have your inventory, like Katana, for example, because that's what I know. So you would have your inventory and manufacturing. So you've got all your ingredients and your processes to like build your products within
Mhm.
Katana. So someone purchases something from one of your Shopify stores, the order goes directly into Katana. And then since you're working with something like ship theory, you can set up automated rules where it's like, okay, if the order is for a hospital in Brazil, we use FedEx for all the Brazilian orders, and
Mhm.
there's a rule set up that's got your custom rates. So basically, it's like a sort of like a hands-off process where it goes from like order your Shopify store understands how much your inventory levels are. Then that connects out to Ship Theory, so it will create the print label for your team. And you sort of got the like 1, 2, 3 process of order, manufacturing to shipping. But you're probably going to need like a bit of a tech stack approach where you've got different specialized tools to get all of these things done. Does that answer the
Okay,
question?
okay. So what is the role of your company, this Catena?
Yeah, so Katana does manufacturing and inventory management.
Okay.
We actually have the next slide. Are there more questions? Because we can talk about
There's
if you
one
have
more from Aaron,
questions.
uh,
Okay,
which is, does ship theory automatically update shipping logs? So Aaron, yeah, basically the way that ship theory reacts is to make calls to the software. It will make a call to Katana. Whatever the information is within Katana will update the status in ship theory. Hopefully that helps. Sorry, Rich, I interrupted you there.
it's all good. Yes, I just wanted to sort of branch out from Mahim's question is if you've got like some pretty detailed questions like the way Mahim does, I would suggest booking in a conversation with one of my sales colleagues, either at Katana or Ship Theory, if you're looking for something to do with your inventory, your like manufacturing questions, I would say book a Katana demo. If you've got shipping and courier questions, talk to Rob's colleagues at Ship Theory. All you need to do is just scan the QR codes right in front of you. You'll also get the links in the follow-up email that will go out tomorrow with the recording. Because yes, our very talented sales colleagues are waiting. They're always waiting and ready to talk to you, and they'll definitely be able to answer your questions better than I can.
So this is where everyone gets their phones out and starts
Yeah,
scanning.
there you
Um,
go.
the beauty of the ship theory team, sales is a strong word. they're very much advisors, and they act as consultants. So if anybody wants to chat, we've got an offer going on until the end of January, whereby it might be of use to have just a meeting with our team and ask a few questions around processes and what you need. They can advise whether ship theory is right for you guys or not. It can be either. So yeah.
Cool. Did you see any other questions pop up, Rob?
Yeah, there are some.
Okay, cool. Do you want to do some questions?
Yeah, I think Maheen's just sent you an email for you to maybe follow up with Rich. So Devin asks, can I ship partial shipments now and the rest later? And how is that built? Within Ship Theory, yeah, we've actually been working quite closely on some updates, and this is one of the good things about the relationship between Katana and Ship Theory, is that when we need something built, we work together closely to make sure that it's built. And that was actually something that came up not too long ago, Devin. So that's actually currently being worked on. So I would suggest, Devin, it might be worth having a bit of a closer look at how Ship Theory works with one of my colleagues, so that you can get a bit further information as to how your process works and whether it fits with the Ship Theory process. It's quite, it's quite flexible, so it can easily be something that you can utilize differently in different methods. I think that's the questions for the moment. At the moment, Rich.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone, today. It was nice to see you all joining the week before holiday season. As I mentioned, head on over to either of our websites if you think of other questions that come up in the future, and we're going to be here to help you out.
Nice to see everybody. Thanks ever so much.